Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Boss Economics World, the only show that takes the dismal science of economics and turns it into a full-blown tragicomedy. I'm your host, the guy who's here to break down the global economic clown show, one tariff tantrum at a time. And oh boy, do we have a doozy for you today. Grab your popcorn, your calculators, and maybe a stress ball, because we're diving headfirst into the latest episode of Geopolitical Tariff Wars, the Trump Strikes Back edition. That's right, folks, it's August 2025, and President Donald J. Trump is back at it, swinging his tariff hammer like Thor on a caffeine bender. This time, his target is India, yes, the world's largest democracy, home to 1.4 billion people, and apparently, the newest villain in Trump's economic superhero saga. Why, you ask? Because India has the audacity, to buy Russian oil, refine it, and sell it on the open market for a profit. Oh, the horror. How dare a sovereign nation make economic decisions in its own interest? Clearly, this calls for a 25% tariff on Indian exports to the US, with promises of even more duties if India doesn't fall in line. And let me tell you, folks, this is just the tip of the iceberg in a global economic mess that's stickier than a vat of molasses at a trade summit. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of this tariff tiff, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. Because here at Boss Economics World, we don't just report the news, we dissect it, satirize it, and serve it up with a side of economic absurdity. So, buckle up, because we're about to unpack the layers of this onion, from the surface-level drama to the deep, dark economic underbelly. And trust me, it's gonna smell worse than a Wall Street trader's cologne after a 12-hour shift. Let's start with the obvious. Trump's tariff threats are classic economic theater. On August 5, 2025, the man who brought us the art of the deal decided to deal India a hefty blow, announcing plans to substantially raise tariffs on Indian exports to the US. Why? Because India is buying Russian oil, 1.7 million barrels a day, to be exact, according to Bloomberg's tanker tracking data, and then refining it into fuels like diesel and gasoline, which they export to the tune of 1.4 million barrels a day. Trump's logic. India's profiting off Russian oil is funding Putin's war machine in Ukraine, and that's a no-no in the eyes of Uncle Sam. But here's the kicker, folks, Trump's not just mad about Ukraine. Oh no. This is personal. See, India's been running a trade surplus with the US, $43 billion last year, according to the IMF, making it the 11th largest trade deficit on America's naughty list. And if there's one thing Trump hates more than a bad hair day, it's a trade deficit. So, what does he do? He slaps on a 25% tariff, one of the highest of any major economy, and threatens secondary sanctions if India doesn't ditch Russian oil by August 8, 2025. Because nothing says diplomacy like a good old-fashioned economic shakedown, am I right? But wait. Plot twist. India's not taking this lying down. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who once enjoyed bromance-level relations with Trump, is now in full defiance mode. India's Ministry of External Affairs fired back, pointing out the hypocrisy of the US and EU, who, surprise, continue to buy Russian energy themselves. And here's the zinger, India only started buying Russian oil in the first place because traditional supplies were diverted to Europe after the Ukraine war began, and guess who encouraged those imports? That's right, the US. Oh, the irony, it's thicker than a New York cheesecake. Now, let's peel back the next layer of this economic onion and talk about the ripple effects. Because, folks, this isn't just a spat between Trump and Modi, it's a global economic powder keg waiting to blow. First up, let's talk oil. India's been buying Russian crude at a discount since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, and why wouldn't they? According to the International Energy Agency, Russian oil was trading at a $20 per barrel discount compared to Brent crude in early 2025. For a country like India, which imports 85% of its oil, that's a no-brainer. But here's the problem, if Trump's secondary sanctions kick in, India might have to ditch Russian oil and look elsewhere, driving up global oil prices. Just last week, India's largest processor panic-bought millions of barrels from the US and UAE, signaling a potential shift that could tighten supply and send prices soaring. And speaking of prices, let's not forget the consumer. Higher oil prices mean higher fuel costs, which means higher inflation. Remember 2022, when oil prices hit $120 a barrel and inflation in the US peaked at 9.1%? Well, buckle up, because we could be in for a sequel. The Federal Reserve's already sweating bullets, having raised interest rates to 5.5% in 2025 to combat lingering inflation, according to their latest minutes. Now, throw in a tariff war with India, and you've got a recipe for stagflation, high inflation, low growth, and a whole lot of economic misery. But wait, there's more. India's not just buying Russian oil, they're refining it and exporting it, with 40% of their fuel exports being diesel and 30% gasoline, per CPLR data. And guess who's buying? Europe, that's who. The EU's been trying to wean itself off Russian energy, but they're still indirectly consuming it through Indian refineries. So, Trump's tariffs aren't just punishing India, they're threatening Europe's energy security, too. And let's not forget the EU's new sanctions package, which bans fuels made from Russian crude. Traders are still scratching their heads, trying to figure out how that's gonna work, but one thing's clear, global supply chains are about to get messy in a toddler's finger-painting session. Now, let's dig into the really juicy stuff, the geopolitical undercurrents. Because, folks, this isn't just about oil or tariffs. It's about power, control, and the future of the global economy. India's not just any country, it's a key player in the BRICS bloc, alongside Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa. And what's the BRICS been up to lately? Oh, just casually trying to dethrone the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. In 2024, the BRICS countries expanded their use of local currencies in trade, with 30% of their transactions now settled in non-dollar currencies, according to the Bank for International Settlements. Trump's not happy about that, folks. He's been railing against India's participation in BRICS, calling it a threat to American economic dominance. And here's where it gets really spicy. Trump's tariffs and sanctions aren't just about Ukraine, they're about sending a message to the BRICS, toe the line, or else. But here's the problem, India's not China. India's a democracy, a US ally in the Indo-Pacific, and a counterweight to China's rise. By alienating India, Trump risks pushing it closer to Russia and China, which is the last thing the US wants. Just look at the data, India's trade with Russia has skyrocketed since 2022, reaching $65 billion in 2024, according to India's Ministry of Commerce. Meanwhile, US-India trade, while still robust at $190 billion, is now under threat from these tariffs. Talk about shooting yourself in the foot, or, in Trump's case, shooting yourself in the foot while tweeting about how great your aim is. And finally, let's shine a spotlight on the hypocrisy, because, folks, it's hypocrisy o'clock. India's Ministry of External Affairs hit the nail on the head when they called out the US and EU for continuing to buy Russian energy. According to Eurostat, the EU imported €90 billion worth of Russian energy in 2024, down from €140 billion in 2021, but still a hefty sum. And the US? Oh, they've been quietly buying Russian uranium to fuel their nuclear reactors, with imports up 40% in 2024, per the US Energy Information Administration. But apparently, it's only a problem when India does it. Classic case of rules for thee, but not for me. And let's not forget the bigger picture, the US encouraged India to buy Russian oil in the first place to stabilize global prices after the Ukraine war began. Now, they're punishing India for doing exactly what they asked. It's like inviting someone to a party, then kicking them out for eating the snacks. Economic diplomacy, folks, it's a circus, and we're all just clowns in the audience. So, what's the takeaway from all this, folks? Well, for starters, Trump's tariff tantrum is a masterclass in economic self-sabotage. By targeting India, he's risking higher oil prices, higher inflation, and strained relations with a key ally, all while doing little to actually hurt Russia. Putin's probably laughing his way to the bank, because let's be real, Russia's oil exports are still flowing, just through different channels. According to the IEA, Russia's oil revenues hit $180 billion in 2024, despite sanctions, thanks to buyers like India, China, and Brazil. For India, this is a wake-up call. Modi's government is already pivoting, buying more US natural gas and communication equipment to appease Trump, but they're not backing down on Russian oil. And why should they? India's energy security is at stake, and with global oil prices projected to hit $100 a barrel by the end of 2025, per Goldman Sachs, they can't afford to play nice. For the US consumer, this means higher prices at the pump and a potential return to the inflation nightmare of 2022. And for the global economy, it's a stark reminder that economic wars are just as messy, and just as costly, as military ones. So, there you have it, folks, the latest chapter in the global economic soap opera, brought to you by Boss Economics World. Will Trump's tariffs bring India to its knees, or will they backfire spectacularly? Will the BRICS dethrone the dollar, or will the US maintain its economic hegemony? And most importantly, will anyone ever figure out how to enforce the EU's sanctions on Russian crude? Stay tuned, because this circus is just getting started. Until next time, keep your wallets close and your tariffs closer. This is Boss Economics World, signing off.